Hey guys! Welcome back to another episode of Kiff Says, a place where we break down the legal aspects of your creative business, and I try to convince you that the law doesn't have to equal scary. Today, I want to tackle a question I get all the time. Can I use this quote? People want to use quotes in presentations, on cards, on prints, in ebooks, and you need to know if it's safe to use or not. First up, anything first published before 1923 it's no longer covered by copyright, so you're free to use all of that material. Anything first published after 1923, we're going to assume is covered by copyright. And so to use something that's covered by copyright, you either need permission from the copyright owner, or your use needs to be considered fair use. Now, I think you might be asking, hey wait, didn't you tell me that short phrases and titles don't get copyright protection? And that's totally true. Short phrases and titles and the like don't get copyright protection. But the vast majority of time, you're pulling this quote out of a book, a speech, a novel, a poem, and those larger works do have copyright protection. And so that quote is protected by copyright. Because of that, we need to figure out if we have permission from the author or if our use is considered fair use. To decide if we can use that quote, we're going to look at the 4 fair use factors. Quickly, remember what the 4 fair use factors are. First, we're going to want to look at why we're using it and how much we're transforming it. Next, what the nature of the underlying work is. Third, how much we're using. And finally, fourth, are we taking away the market for the original creator? When it comes to the first factor, we're looking at what's the purpose of our use and how much we're transforming it. Now, most of us are using these quotes for commercial purposes. We're not using them for news reporting, for education, and the like. Those socially important purposes that the Copyright Act calls out. We're using them to make money. And so we're going to have to look at the second part of this first factor, which is how much we've transformed it. Have we added value to this quote, putting it in a larger part of the conversation and context by including it? Have we elevated it to something else than just a quote? If so, our use is much more likely to be considered fair use. The second factor is, what's the nature of the underlying work? Remember, things like facts and statistics don't get copyright protection. So the more factual in nature that underlying quote is, the more likely our use will be considered fair use. The third factor is, how much have we used? Taking 2 lines out of a haiku is very different than taking 2 lines out of a 500-page book. The latter is much more likely to be considered fair use because we're taking a smaller percentage. Now, there's no blanket 5% rule that only taking that amount will constitute fair use. Not only is it the percentage that we've taken, but are we taking the heart, the core of that original work? Is this the most important little nugget in that book? Or is it peripheral to that conversation, that larger conversation occurring in that book that you've taken it from? Finally, we're going to look at that fourth factor and see if we're taking away a market for the original creator to monetize their work. Are you making it so that this book author can never come out with a line of greeting cards with these quotes on them? Or are you not taking away a market from the author because you're doing something that isn't something that they could monetize, or that you're adding something to it that means that that author couldn't monetize it in that way? If so, if you're not taking away a market for the original author to monetize their work, then it's much more likely that your use will be considered fair use. So next time you want to use a quote, remember these 4 factors. How much am I transforming it? How factual is this quote? How much am I using? And am I taking away a market? And make sure you consider all 4 of these things before you decide if it's safe to use that quote. I hope this gives you more information and confidence next time you want to use a quote in your work. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you shared it with your network. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.